I'm Johnny Massacre and welcome to the Johnny Massacre Show. It is the Thursday Night Massacre. On tonight's show, YouTube and big tech are officially a threat to the free world, to the free West, to freedom of speech and everything you hold dear to you. So what is this show all about? Well, YouTube have come out and said they're going to start removing any videos that claim there is widespread voter fraud in the 2020 election. So if I Google, it's all over the news. If I Google YouTube, take down video 2020 election, voter fraud, this is what people are saying. Here we go. So I'm going to go over to bbc.com. I might as well bring this up on my screen so you can see it. They say US election, YouTube to ban videos alleging widespread voter fraud. YouTube said on Wednesday it would start removing content that falsely alleges that widespread voter fraud changed the result of the US election. The update applies to all new content, including videos from President Donald Trump. So you're not even allowed to say that you think there is widespread voter fraud, because I literally said that I think, in my opinion, on my last video, and it's already been censored. And apparently this is really going to come into effect where after Biden gets into power, that's the date when YouTube have said they're going to ramp up this censorship and they're going to start literally physically removing the videos and copyright striking. So you can see what they're trying to do. They've been waiting on the sidelines for years, waiting for a Democratic president to get into power, at which point they reveal their true colors and they come out in Big Brother Orwellian form and they just start removing anything they disagree with. This isn't even a slippery slope. It's just a one-way street to complete censorship. This is what China do. This is what totalitarian regimes do, right? North Korea, China, say anything bad against the dear leader, you are screwed, you are censored, you are memory hold. And guess what? YouTube, they're really pro Black Lives Matter, which is literally founded by trained, self-confessed Marxists. Marxists being people who adopt the Karl Marx philosophy. Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. He created communism, which created Maoist China, which created Stalinist Russia, and YouTube love it, and leftists love it because they love BLM, and that's what BLM love. So is it any surprise that America now is going down a pathway to socialism and communism? Not really. That's why I live in Japan. So I've got the Biden teleprompter loaded up on my screen, and I've just written a lot of notes about how I'm feeling about what's going on. And I'm just going to read it. I'm going to squint like Joe Biden, try not to let the Alzheimer's get the better of me, because Alzheimer's is a very serious disease. I would never make a joke about that. I'm suffering from Alzheimer's myself, early onset Alzheimer's. So I feel very sorry for Joe Biden. But let me read the Joe Biden teleprompter and tell you what's on my mind about all this. So here we go. I wrote, from the moment Biden is sworn into power, it's going to be illegal to claim that he came to power fraudulently on YouTube and across big tech, basically. Big tech will follow. Other platforms will follow. And how about, for the last 4 years, the millions of unproved allegations that Trump was bought off by Russia and that there was Russian collusion? How about that? Are those going to be removed from YouTube? No, they're not going to be removed because they were never proved. But however, those can stay up because they are part of the narrative. That's what Big Brother wants you to see. And I saw this coming miles away. I saw this coming in 2016. Do you know when I saw this coming? I have a song called Never Be Normal is the name, and I'm going to be re-releasing it soon with an animated video. Look out for it. Now, the video that the company, the first single I made that blew up is called Ultrasound. You can watch it there. Now, that was animated by a company. Now, the same company I went to, and I asked them to animate my follow-up single called Never Be Normal. But they refused to do it because they said it was too offensive and that people would get upset. So at that point in 2016, that's when, I'm not going to say I started to like Donald Trump because he's Orange Hitler, but that's when some people started to have an affinity for Donald Trump because probably they saw that censorship was evil and social justice is a pathway to fascism, and they realized it had to be stopped. Other people couldn't see this, but I saw it. And there might be other people out there who know more than me about politics, but they're not as cool as me and they're not like your mate. And so let me tell it how it is. So I saw it coming way back. And now that Biden's coming into power, it looks like, no, definitely he's coming into power. You can't question that because that's what's happening. Seriously, I mean that literally. Now, big tech and the left can reveal their plan. This is it. You think things were bad before the election with censorship? You ain't seen nothing yet. I said, you think things are bad. I don't think things are bad. I think everything's fine. I think the same as what they want me to think. I wrote, look, Trump is only now talking about repealing Section 230, which is a law that absolves online platforms like Facebook and Twitter of responsibility for what users post. So they can't get sued for bad things users post because they're not publishers. They're just a platform. Even though some people say that they actually do act as publishers because, like YouTube are doing here, some might say that that is selectively editing content. And so therefore they are a publisher and they shouldn't be protected under Section 230. That's what some people say, but I wouldn't dare say that, would I? Because this video can't possibly be censored. I'm on YouTube's side, right? And algorithms can detect sarcasm and the humanity and the soul. So there's no possible way that I could be anything other than on YouTube's side. Twitter, YouTube, they didn't do this before because they knew that if they did, Trump would have already repealed Section 230, taken away their privileges, and they wouldn't be able to censor Donald Trump in the lead up to the election and censor him around when Biden's organized to take over power. But now that it looks like Biden's getting in, they're allowed to start removing videos and they're showing you what they wanted to do all along. If they had done that before, my point is, Trump wouldn't have allowed it and he would have repealed it. Now, Section 230, I'm going to do another video on this, but it's not as simple as people think. People are completely wrong about Section 230. You think that if you repeal it, then suddenly big tech is kind of screwed and everything's going to go back to the way it was before and there'll be no removing of questionable content that people deem as hate speech, even though it might actually be fine. Might be fine, not saying it is, because I wouldn't say that hate speech was fine, would I? Branding anything that you disagree with, any diversity of thought as hate speech, that's just the right thing to do. But if you get rid of Section 230, it means these platforms will be sued up the arse for everything, and then potentially there'll be no platforms at all for free speech, because every time something's posted online, the person who allows it to be posted on their platform will get sued, and so there won't be any platform. So this is the problem. The internet seemingly can't exist with or without Section 230, but we'll get into that in a later episode. But now that it appears that Trump is on the way out, the Democrats know they can show, some say the Democrats know that they can show their hands and share what they really want to do. And this means, some people say, censor everything. And once they start doing this, which they've already done with my videos and other people's videos, you might never see any Republican conservative thought or truth ever again. You're never going to see an election won by anyone other than someone on the left potentially, because there'll be no information out there anymore. You can only see one-sided information, and that is totalitarianism. Some people say this. I'm not saying this. I'm not saying this honest. Some people say the left want to pack the courts, remove the Electoral College, ban literally any Republican thought at all, and any Republican platforms, when it's already, the media is 90% left-wing, and every single fact checker is pretty much left-wing that's approved by Facebook. And you don't think that the left and the Democrats are going to further protect big tech if and when they get into power, this could literally be the end of everything. As I said, I saw this coming in 2016 with Anita Sarkeesian. So Anita Sarkeesian was one of the first high-profile social justice warriors. So when my music video got censored because I put in a line about Anita Sarkeesian, I felt something in my heart and soul that social justice was extremely dangerous. I couldn't explain why, I couldn't articulate it, but I'm one of the first individuals to have seen this coming, and my spider sense was tingling. Something was horribly wrong here when my music video got censored and I started to find out what social justice was. People put me down. People called me paranoid. People attacked me. But I was right. Then I started to educate myself. I read Gulag Archipelago, which I mentioned nearly on every episode because it's so central to my own philosophy. I read about liberal fascism. I read about left-wing terror. I read about Marxism. And all of that is in social justice. The thing that got my video censored, and the thing that got my recent videos censored, and the thing that is censoring any diversity of thought away from left-wing-ism today. I read about Chinese struggle sessions, where things that are actually normal, like free thinking, are made taboo, and you had to repent for your sins in a cult-like manner. I read about Russian informants, which are the old school equivalent of the modern day social justice warrior that were behind the Russian Revolution and the socialist communist uprising. This is what social justice can create. I read about something called the German or Nazi Gleichschaltung. Now, the Gleichschaltung, my understanding of it is every single thing ever has to be Nazi propaganda. Movies, infused with it. Education, infused with it. Everything, everywhere is infused with it. What about today? Basketball, football, songs, music, sports, as well as, of course, the news. Some might say it's infused with leftist propaganda. Guess what? That was right-wing fascism stuff with the Nazis. How about the left-wing extremism of socialism? In Stalin's socialist communist Russia, where tens, if not hundreds of millions were killed, Russia's own people were killed by the state in the name of finding a utopia. Socialism and their ideology was everywhere. You couldn't find a school book without it. You couldn't find a school without a professor trying to get it into every single facet of education, whether you're talking about arachnids or the muscular feet of a mollusk. And how about today with Hollywood, music industry and sport? See any parallels to the Nazi Gleichschaltung or socialist indoctrination? I'm asking you. I'm not giving you my opinion. Now, what about the universities? Some might say an entire generation of kids have been raised under the umbrella of Marxism, to embrace Marxism. And if that's true, you simply cannot erase that stuff now. It's already in the universities. How do you get that out? How would you try to stop the 1619 project that some might say skips over the real issues facing minorities today in favor of just saying everything is bad and everything is racist and give me money for teaching you that? And if you don't, you're racist and you're in trouble. Biden is going to put the 1619 project back into schools. And so all of this could be the end of everything. But I hold out hope, a flicker of hope. Because the will of the people tends to always come true. Even in socialist Russia, going into the 1950s, flickers of hope emerged and eventually communism fell. And then the people could leave Russia and go somewhere else. So I hold out a flicker of hope for truth, for honesty, for justice. That's why some people believe this election isn't honest. Some people, not me, I'm not saying that. Ban the people who say that. What if what those people say is true? Is that going to be banned as well? If it is, that really is exactly the same as how communist China operates. Disney is already in bed with China. They edit their movies, and so do Hollywood, to make money in China and fund that kind of regime. Some people say Biden's already in bed with them. Some people call Biden Beijing Biden. There's literally a video. I could probably Google it right now. Of a Chinese politician that came out in the last week or so literally saying that before Trump, China had extreme influence in high circles of US politics. As soon as Trump got in, they didn't. And what with Trump appearing to be on his way out, and this is quoting, I'm not making this up. This is a literal direct quote. And that when Biden gets back in, the established elite is back and China can re-exert their influence. That's what China literally came out and said via a politician. And you can go and find it yourself. I'm actually going to link that in the box below. Make sure you look at this. So for anyone who had the audacity to come out and say that the Bidens could have possibly done any corrupt things in China, and I would never say such a thing, a Chinese politician came out and basically said all that was true. He said it. I didn't say it. I would never transgress like that. Go and look at it yourself. Go and look at reality yourself and let me know what you think. It's the first link in the box below. Make sure you check it out. And the ironic thing is, the left have been saying that Trump is the end of democracy. Donald Trump is the end of democracy and the free world. Some might say that nothing could be further from the truth. If that had been true, where was Trump banning the left doing all of this stuff? Where was Trump banning the left from speaking, shutting down the left, making laws to remove videos from YouTube with any dissenting thought? Where was all that stuff? Where was it? Show me one single example. Where was Trump banning the left, saying things like men can become women and women can become men? Some might say that's scientifically impossible. Trump said that. And where was he banning the left from that free speech? Where was it? Where was Trump's threat to democracy? Where was Trump's threat to the free world? Where was it? Show me the reality. I know reality is not really flavor of the month right now, and it doesn't really amount to much, and reality doesn't count, and you can just memory hole reality. But if there's a slice of reality out there proving those claims, I would love to see it. Where was Trump squashing the violent uprising, bringing in the military in every single state in America when leftist Marxists, alleged leftist Marxists, only some people said, I'm not saying that, some people call them that, when they were allegedly burning down and mutilating people? Where was Trump murdering them with the military like Tiananmen Square in China? Where was it? Where was Trump banning the left doing one single thing? And the whole time, some might say, the left accused the right of doing exactly what they plan to do and what they're doing now. Some might say that's a true hallmark of China stuff. When you look at the Chinese Communist Party news, they always accuse aggressively the people of doing exactly what they're doing. And they accuse other countries of what they're doing. You can see it with various organizations, World Health and Trade, UN, stuff like that. When they accuse America of human rights abuses, it's called gaslighting. Some might say the left are specialists at that. I would never say such a thing. They're always right. They represent freedom, right? Because people who represent freedom censor things and remove things, don't they? Some might say we're in serious trouble. People are moving over to Parler. People keep recommending in the comments that I move over to Rumble and various other conservative platforms that the left will call right-wing extremist platforms. I wouldn't know. I haven't seen it myself, but I guess they must be right. And I should agree with them, because if I don't, then I'm going to be a bad person and a heretic as well. And I'll be kicked out of the cult and kept in the stocks or cancelled. No, I'm just joking. They'd never do that. Only an idiot bigot would suggest such a thing, right? Those other platforms, what concerns me is moving over to them will only create an echo chamber. If the right moved over to them because they felt, wrongly of course, that they're being censored and that freedom of speech is under attack on all the leftist platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Google, take your pick, they're all left-leaning. Some might say, I'm not saying that, some people might say it, considering that the people who leave those platforms, they're just going to go over to a rightist platform, and it's going to become a right-wing echo chamber. And then so if the left is in their bubble and the right is in their bubble, no one's listening to each other. How is that going to help? So that is not necessarily the answer, although what alternative do we have? And who is instigating this division? Who is it? Who's pushing people over to the other side? Obviously, it's all the right's fault. They're just full of hate, and they're messing up all these beautiful free platforms on the left. And so they're going over to stew in those pits of hate on the right, such as Parler, Rumble, and so on, right? I'm going to lose a lot of subscribers from what I'm about to say, but all I care about is having a chat and telling the truth. And I aim for the truth as much as possible. I might not always be right, but I'm a pretty damn good shot. I have a lot of people in the comments who don't think I'm radical enough. I can never be radical enough. I always have to be radical and say radical stuff for some people. They're never satisfied. I don't want to be radical. I just want to say the truth. Shoot me. What has happened is quite simply this. The internet met social justice. That's why some people think we are in this mess we are in today. I don't think we're in a mess, but some people say we are. It's because the internet met social justice. And it just so turns out that the people who created big tech and the internet at large, basically, in how we use it, something that some people said would never change anything, would never catch on. It turns out, guess what? The internet is the most powerful thing ever in the modern age, and it literally controls the free flow of information and communication today. So the people who basically created that are all leftists, and they're unelected. They just did it in this evil capitalist market. It controls the world. The internet controls the world. And you cannot use the internet without searching for stuff, and you search for stuff on Google. And you cannot use the internet without communicating, and you communicate on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and so on, all owned by leftists. It's how all business is conducted. It's how money is made. It's how we travel. It's the hotels we stay in. Airbnb, Californian, some people say a hard left company. I have mountains of evidence showing that I didn't create, but somehow it found its way onto my hard drive. I could show you if you want. So if someone controls all of that, the free flow of information, how we travel, how we shop, how we communicate business, and the money flow, they literally can frame that and put a filter on it. So every single thing that you do or is done is through a leftist lens. That's possible. I'm not saying that really happens, but that's possible. And everything is done the leftist way. Whoever controls the internet can monitor literally everything you do, everything you say, everywhere you go. You are being tracked. You know on your phone when that message comes up, says, "Can I track you?" Voice recognition, the software's so powerful. Everything you say, everything you do, it's all logged online. And it's all in the hands of leftist companies, a lot of which support Black Lives Matter, who are Marxist. And the Marxist countries right now and Marxist systems, they will retrospectively punish anybody who transgresses and says anything that is wrong think or wrong speech. But that's not enough. Knowing all these things and controlling all these things isn't enough. Some might say they want more control. Recently, you hear news about how you need a C-word passport, where if you've got the virus, you have to have a vaccine in order to travel. And if you don't, you won't be able to travel. In communist China, they already have a system. It's called a social credit system, and you won't be allowed to travel if you have a bad credit score. So in the West, you could have a bad social currency if you don't take the vaccine. But in the future, since anyone who's not a leftist, some people say, I don't say, is a racist bigot, then considering everything they've ever said is already online, and considering that information is controlled by leftists who control Airbnb and travel companies and stuff, someone who's paranoid might say, well, people who aren't leftists won't be able to do anything in the future. Much like how people in China who say anything remotely negative against the Communist Party can't do anything today. But maybe I'm just paranoid. I'm just paranoid, right? This could never happen. What I'm saying is power corrupts. People want power for power's sake. And humans organize themselves into power hierarchies. And if you give anyone this kind of power, they're going to abuse it. The socialists in Russia already tried to do this kind of stuff, but they didn't have anything nearly as powerful as the internet today. They did not have a tool like that. Imagine if back then, in Stalin's Russia, they had the internet where they could monitor everything you ever said, everywhere you went. There literally would have been retrospective punishment for everybody. And there would have been an excuse to throw anyone into a gulag, as if there weren't enough excuses already. Anything you said at any time would have been pulled up and held against you. If the socialists in Russia in the 20th century, in the early and mid 20th century, had the power that big tech wields today. And some might say this is where we're going now. And some might say this is what big tech are doing now. This is the road we're going down. And all the way, people who say that might be gaslighted and told this is not true. Anyways, Republicans need to do something now, or this is over. This is all over. Because people are just accepting this left, right, and center. Some people say the left are pushing the boundaries more and more and more to see what they can get away with. And nobody's pushing back at all. People are just nodding along as their freedoms are whittled away. Look at the lockdowns, for example. This is all just conjecture. This isn't my opinion. Look at the lockdowns. People were forced to stay in their houses. Had anyone who questioned that got abused, said they were killing their grandmother. To the point where now the C word, some might say, is more about showing your compliance with the rules than actually looking at logic or evidence. Once politicians realized, some might say, that they could literally make people stay in their house and lose their jobs and get away with it without complaint or pushback, they knew they could get away with anything. And some might say that means certain politicians realized they could use the crisis of the C words to pile on any other policies they want, which is basically top-down government control and big government, managing every facet of your life. When you're locked down and losing your job and you're on benefits, who else do you have but the warm, loving embrace of the state, perhaps in exchange for your vote? And there's nothing you can do about it. Once that happens, they can get away with anything. This is turning into a bit of a rambling rant now, I must admit. But hey, I'm human. Let me tell you exactly how I'm feeling. I wrote, during the Biden-Trump debates, China literally censored everything that Trump said. I know this was in the Mike Pence-Kamala Harris debate. They censored everything that Mike Pence said. This is a fact, look it up. But they didn't censor anything Kamala Harris said. And some might say that tells you all you need to know. That America is now trying to do what China did in their Marxist revolution. But this revolution is not a war on the streets. It's not a bloody war manifesting itself in what you saw in Tiananmen Square in China. It's an online war. This is a war of information. It's insidious, and it's glossed over as something that's actually correct. Especially once you're confused with all the weird deconstructionist terminology some might say the left like to use. Especially once you wear the mask. Especially once you let down even the last boundary to your personal freedom. Especially when people say that men can become women and women can become men. And anyone who doesn't say that is a heretic. So some might say social justice, all this censorship, is just a Trojan horse to the cult. It's a Trojan horse to leftist policies. And unless you get on that horse, you're going to be cast out. You know, liberal culture, actually, parts of it are amazing. They're amazing. Swear words, right? Conservatives hate swear words. I have some hardcore... It's really interesting. There's loads of people in the comments who say things like, you swear too much and I can't watch your channel. That's where I draw the line. I love swearing. And every time I swear, I feel just a little bit free. Call me what you want. That's the truth. So I realised that a lot of conservatives don't like that. And so liberals, I think, brought us the whole swear culture. That was decent. Liberals love other countries and they want lots of immigrants. And in some ways, that's awesome. Some of the best girlfriends I had came from other countries. My first girlfriend who I really loved was from Taiwan. She was awesome. I probably wouldn't have met her if my country was super conservative, nationalist, right-wing, don't want any foreigners in, right? And what, ironically, liberal culture today calls cultural appropriation, where you take something from another culture without getting on your knees and groveling to say thank you for it, and then melding it with your culture and creating something awesome. Back in the day, because of liberals' open arms to other cultures, we got so many cool cultures. My whole life, I produced drum and bass music and other types of music, and I rap and I DJ. Check out my stuff on my channel. But really, my favorite music is drum and bass. Drum and bass comes from dub reggae. Loads of Jamaicans came to England at some point in the fairly recent history, and they brought over all their culture. Yes, they brought crime as well. It's true, they brought the yardie culture, but they brought dub reggae, and they brought this awesome music that became my life. So there's lots of things about liberal culture that I actually like, especially when it created a cross-pollination of cultures for the better. It brought a lot of good stuff to my country, England. And it made people question their country, right? It made people question the establishment and the Queen and all this kind of stuff. To question colonialism, I don't think it's such a bad thing. My personal view is you can't be against colonialism, because if it hadn't happened, you wouldn't exist. You'd literally not be alive today. You would be dead. And if your country hadn't created a colonial history, some other country would have done it, and they'd be the leading culture today. And it's sad. No one likes to see anybody die. But at least liberalism kind of made you question that stuff. What about the history? Where was I from? What did my ancestors do? It's good to know about that, and it's good to question it. But now, some people might say the left have just gone too far. You know, we had this era in the 90s where it's all kind of fun and free, but now it's just, some people say, I would never say such a thing, but some people might say it's gone too far and it's becoming radical and extreme. And in my opinion, the radical left is just as bad as the radical right. The left, some might say, have got control of big tech, which, as I've previously said today, means they've got control of what you can see, hear, and think. And this is the problem with the internet being controlled by the left, because there are zero checks and balances, and they can't get voted out. And the left's control and radicality just goes further and further and further and further and further left, and it seems like there's no limit how extreme they're going to get. But this can't happen in a government. Because if a government gets too extreme, in a good democratic society, that government will get voted out. And that's some might argue is what happened with Trump. The left got a bit extreme with Obama. Some people didn't like the dual gender bathrooms and the constant identity politics, so they voted in Trump. But with big tech, no one's going to vote them out. There's no checks and balances. And since big tech are kind of like a government within a government, or I think a better terminology would be a government outside of a government, because the Constitution of America is kind of outdated in relation to big tech, some might argue. Big tech is a government outside of a government, but without any checks and balances. And you're seeing what America would be like if it had no checks and balances and had a kind of leftist slant to culture. America would be, some might say, would be a complete mess right now. It would just be one party rule and it would just get super radical. So what you're seeing, what you don't see necessarily happening in America to this point, where radical parties can get voted out, you are seeing, some might say, in big tech, where those controllers will never get voted out. And that's why some might say big tech is so radical. And you're seeing so much censorship and fascism, liberal fascism. So it almost feels like big tech is a new government because the government have done nothing to rein it in. Big tech's rules dictate world policy. And this is dangerous in some opinions, because America kind of dictates world policy. Everyone goes along with it. People follow it. And America basically establishes the world rules. And since big tech is like a government outside of a government, the rules that they make have a similar effect on the world, and yet they're unelected officials. Airbnb, for example. Go into Airbnb's terms and conditions. You will see they have a lot of stuff about racism and discrimination. Now, I know someone in Japan who created a tour on Airbnb. And on that tour, this girl was giving people a tour of a fun area. Now, she was sexually harassed by Japanese people on that tour, and she's Japanese herself. And whenever she got a Japanese booking, she thought, this is strange, because Japanese people generally don't want a tour of an area they should be familiar with. If it was foreigners, it was never fishy, in her opinion, because foreigners had never been to Japan, so they want to see the surrounding area. But Japanese people wanting to get a tour of Japan is like an English person wanting to see a red bus and a red phone box. Something was up. My friend complained to Airbnb, and she got her tour shut down for racism. Because that's in Airbnb's terms and conditions, that you can't refuse anyone for that reason. However, in the same terms and conditions, they say in Islamic places, you are allowed to turn away people based on their own sexual identity, for example, and physical kind of preferences. And so Airbnb kind of selectively create their rules that affect the whole world. This happened in Japan, but it was made by a Californian company. And that is how powerful the left is. They dictate world culture, because they operate like a government outside of a government. If you break any hate speech rules on any of these platforms like Uber, Airbnb, whatever, you can't use a taxi, you can't stay in a hotel, even if what they deem as hate speech is saying a woman can't become a man and a man can't become a woman. If you don't believe in that, then you might not be able to use an essential service. And one day in the future, probably all services are going to be used online. And if all of those services are controlled by leftists, and if the censorship at that point is far more than it is now, what that means is you quite simply have to agree with leftist ideology. You quite simply have to vote for someone like Biden. You quite simply have to state that men can become women and women can become men and sex is amorphous. You have to believe all of these things. You have to believe in abortion. You have to believe, if you don't, you can't live, you can't eat, you can't go anywhere. Some might say that might happen. And some might say that's why the censorship of my videos and my old videos and censorship of anyone who's questioning widespread voter fraud in elections on YouTube, some might say this censorship is extremely threatening to the world. Some might say that. I'm not saying that, but some people might. So I'm going to now bring your eyes over to a few tweets online regarding what other people are saying about YouTube's decision to censor anyone on their platform and eventually remove videos if they claim there was widespread voter fraud. I'm not saying this, other people are saying it. Tim Pool This is what Tim Pool said. These are editorial guidelines. Time to start suing YouTube, as they are now issuing direct guidance on what you can publish outside what is prescribed in Section 230. So he highlights a line in YouTube's official blog where YouTube say that states have certified their election results, and therefore you're not allowed to question the election and not allowed to talk about voter fraud, even though the Supreme Court of the United States has just taken up a case pushed through by Texas challenging the United States 2020 election and claiming that there is voter fraud, among other things. But even though that's literally happening in the Supreme Court, you're not allowed to talk about it. So then Mark Dice, who's a conservative kind of comedian commentator, he said, I hope YouTube bans Senator Ted Cruz for violating their new election misinformation policy. Maybe then he'll wake up. Why hasn't YouTube nor the CEO, Susan, ever been the topic of discussion at any of the hearings on Capitol Hill? So, quite simply, some might say that the writing's been on the wall for a long time, and yet the politicians who can make changes are just too old to understand what is going on. And so nothing's been done about it. And yes, it really does go on and on and on. But I think I pretty much said most of what I wanted to say today. I just really wanted to get off my chest how I'm feeling about current climate of censorship and whatnot. There's going to be no music today, and there's going to be no swearing. The no swearing part was extremely difficult, but I wanted to get that off my chest. So to recap, YouTube is going to be restricting videos that say there is widespread voter fraud. Even if you say, I think that, in my opinion, which is what I've done on my videos that got censored, that is wrong thing, and you're not allowed to do that. And apparently next year from January, any videos doing that will be removed, and you might get a copyright strike. That's what's going to happen. And some might say that's censorship. So these are interesting moves by big tech, which some might say are quite brazen, which might indicate how censorship is going to look coming next year and in the years to come. This might dictate what you're allowed to say. It might even dictate what you're allowed to think, because if other big tech platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, Twitter start doing this kind of stuff, which some might argue Twitter are already doing, then anyone who doesn't think like a leftist will be outcasted, and you might not be able to communicate at all online. What do you think about all of this? Please leave your comments in the box below. I'm very happy you're with me. And to finish off today, I would like to say that social justice warriors do not have a monopoly on dyed hair. It used to be quite cool to dye your hair, darling, right? You know, when you're a punk, you dye your hair green because you show you just don't care, right? But recently, in the universities and stuff, like some people will call them SJWs, right? They've been dyeing their hair blue and pink and whatnot. So I thought, you know what? You don't own that. Now I own it. And I tell you what, mate, I've been Johnny Massacre, and you better be back for the next video. Otherwise, I'll be coming round your house. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell, because that is what all those other people tell you to do. Laters.